We have been talking about this cycle, and we'll continue to talk about this cycle of loving your neighbors. It's the second greatest commandment, to love your neighbors as you love yourself. And then getting into the lives of our neighbors, loving them, being kind and compassionate to them, showing them the love of Christ, and then moving them to loving God, teaching them who God is. I think a clear example of this is when Paul goes into Athens. He begins his speech to the pagans with, "I see that in every way possible you are a very religious people." Paul begins with loving them. He gives them a compliment about their paganism, their dedication to the pagan gods and goddesses. And then Paul says, "I see that in every way you're a religious people. You even have a statue to an unknown God. Now about this unknown God, let me tell you who he is." Paul moves them to love God. He teaches them who God is. And finally, we need to move people and move one another to serving others. Faith without works is dead. Our theme this year is straining toward the goal. Theme verses are Philippians 3:13 and 14. Paul says, "Brothers, I do not consider that I have made it my own." He's talking about suffering to the point of death. "I have not made this my own, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and straining forward to what lies ahead. I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." I love that Paul talks about this as a struggle. I love that Paul isn't deceitful. He's not pretending like the Christian walk is easy. Paul acknowledges that it's tough, that it requires straining, that we have to push through to the next day. And I think that's so important because so many Christians, I feel like they give up because they've been told that Christianity ought to be easy. That if God is on our side, if Jesus is on our side, life is going to be easy. Life is going to be full of blessings and honor and respect. And Christians learn that life knocks you flat on your face. I think a lot of us have experienced a lot of heartaches in life. We're going to experience more. I can guarantee that. As long as we're living and breathing, we will experience loss and hurt and brokenness and broken relationships. We will experience those things. And we, like Paul, ought to be straining toward the goal and not getting distracted and not looking back and not trying to fix things that we can't fix and try to focus on things that we shouldn't focus on. Paul says, "I have one goal, and that's what I strain towards. I strain forward to what lies ahead." Today's sermon, we're going to talk about gathering the harvest. When it's harvest time, we go out and we gather the harvest. I always liked working on a farm, and I've talked about this before, but I never really crunched numbers and did the math. So I'm going to brag about when I was young and in shape. I'm no longer young or in shape. But we used to have friendly competitions on the farm, and we wanted to see how fast we could unload the hay wagons. And so, kicked bales into a wagon would land and get wedged in there, and they're pretty hard to unload these wagons. And like a typical decent speed is 20 minutes to unload a hay wagon of 100 bales. And we wanted to see if we could cut that in half. And so there were three of us that were working at the time, and we got our time down to our quickest load, and we were pretty consistent with this, was 9.5 minutes. It's pretty fast. So Jacob, don't get any ideas. I'm not for hire right now. That's pretty fast. 9.5 minutes is one bale that's being handled every 5.7 seconds. And we would have two people in a wagon. One person was up in the haymow. That meant the person up in the haymow handled every single bale that came their way. So one bale every 5.7 seconds. Well, when you're stacking, you have to stack good, or your haymow is gonna fall. So everything has to be nice and tight. You also have to salt. We would have a 5-gallon bucket of salt. This included all of that. And so the person up in the mow had the hardest job, and we would rotate out. But the point of the story is, when it was harvest time, we knew that we had to get as many bales in as possible. And so we just kind of made it a friendly competition. And harvest time was not a time to be lazy. And I like this phrase. Charles, I said I was going to use a phrase that you use in class, and so here it is. We will only rise to the lowest level of expectations. In other words, if somebody sets the bar really low and says, you know, you're going to get a trophy if you just show up to church, right? Nobody's going to be like, no, that's not good enough. I'm going to break beyond that, and I'm going to be the best that there's going to be. I'm going to go out. I'm going to start a ministry. I'm going to preach the gospel everywhere I go. I'm going to be a super Christian. Like, nobody's going to rise to that level when the bar has been set extremely low. We will only rise to the lowest level of expectations. Another example of this, I think, is it's something really cool to witness, actually. But Cameron's in All-Stars. Actually, today he has a championship game for sanctioned games. And they're going in undefeated. And so we're kind of expecting a win today. We're not hoping for a win. We're expecting a win. Because that's where we set the bar. And it's really cool because when you see all-star kids practice for the first time, even at their very first practice, and we've seen these kids on different teams all throughout the season, the regular Little League season, but something happens when the all-star team comes together for the first time. Something happens up here, and it happens on the field, and you can see it. There's no mistaking it. Like that, these kids go from playing well to playing exceptionally well. Because the expectation is higher for all-star kids. And it's not people berating them and telling them that, threatening them that you better play well. It's just that they're around other people who are really good players. And so they have to bring their A game. And imagine if an all-star team was put together and half the team was just a random selection of kids that, because everybody should have a chance and, everybody has a fair shot at this. That's half the team. And the other half of the team were hand-selected kids who are the best of the best. Imagine what that would do to the morale, really, of the whole team. Half of the team is going to feel intimidated because they know that they can't play as well as the other half of the team. And that half of the team is going to be discouraged because the other half of the team will never play as well as they played because they just aren't on that same level. But when you raise the expectation, when you raise that level for everybody, everybody excels. And we're witnessing that. It was pretty cool to see Cameron pitch. He was a starting pitcher for the last game that they won. And Tom, Cameron's coach, came up to me and he said, "Hey, Cameron's starting for the game." And he's like, "I want you to pump him up and have him fully prepared. Have him prepared mentally, physically, make sure he rests, make sure he's hydrated. Have him ready to go at that game." And I said, "Oh, he'll be ready." They won that game 13-0. Because the expectations were high. And think about this for the way that we do church. I see a lot of churches setting the bar so stinking low for people. And I don't ever want to be that congregation where we set the bar so low that people only rise to the lowest level of expectations. And here's where I'm going with all this. I believe fully with all of my heart that right now the harvest is ripened. That we're living in a time where the harvest is ripened for Christians. It's so crazy to me because there are two things going on. There's this huge dichotomy that's going on. Churches, institutional churches, four walls, church buildings, organized religion. Those churches are failing at a rate that's unprecedented in our nation's history. They're closing their doors at unprecedented rates. The other side of that coin is that church plants, house churches, are growing at an unprecedented rate that people are scratching their heads. Statisticians are scratching their heads, and they're like, where are all of these churches coming from? It's unstoppable. Christianity is not in decline. We hear the things like, oh, we used to be a Christian nation and we're not anymore. I'm like, it says who? Where are we setting the bar? You know what I believe? I believe that there's a great awakening happening right now. I hear young people being trashed about how they're lazy. It's the computer generation, and they don't know how to have conversations with people. And like we talk down to kids like they're a bunch of losers and flunkies who the next generation is doomed. I don't believe that, not for a second. I look out and it's cool seeing our out-of-staters. Because I know these kids, and I know their academic levels. I know their talents and abilities, their God-given talents and abilities. I know what these kids are not only capable of, I know what they're doing. I know what they're doing with their lives, and this is our future. When we set the bar high, and when we realize this is a time of harvest in our country right now. It is absolutely a time of harvest. And so the scripture that was read for us is so true today. During the time of harvest, a slack hand causes poverty. It causes poverty. But the hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son. But he who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. You remember when Jesus prayed for workers? He said, the harvest is ripened. It's ready. We're ready to gather. I'm praying for workers. We need more workers. I think this is the state of the church right now. I think more than ever. I feel it. I believe it. I read statistics. This isn't just a feeling. This is hard statistics saying that we have a mass shortage of people going into ministry. A mass shortage. My own alma mater, Harding, just closed their campus in Memphis, where you guys live, right? This is all the big buzz in Memphis. Harding closed their campus at 1000 Cherry Road, and they moved to main campus in Searcy, Arkansas, because of the decline, financial and body count, of people going into ministry. It was a dying program. And they put it on life support as long as they could put it on life support, and finally realized we're better off to sell the property, move everybody to main campus Searcy, and see how long we can kind of plug along and, reinvent the wheel the best we can and hope it survives. There's that part of the story going on, and it's not just Churches of Christ. This is every denomination everywhere. I just had a conversation on Friday with somebody who was saying that another denomination, actually named 2 denominations, are in worse shape than what we are. Again, that's the one side of the coin. The other side of the coin is that we have young people saying, why do I need to go get a degree and spend 9 years in school when I can be faithful to God and the harvest is ripe right now? And I can open up my home. I'm not tying up all these resources. I'm not tying up money. I'm not spending, look at what real estate's doing right now in the United States. To build a church building that's even this size, this is a tiny building. This is 5,000 square feet. To build something like this right now in our town, real estate in Somerset has gotten absolutely insane. We have a neighbor 2 houses up from us whose house just went for sale for over over $500,000. How much is it? Like $573 or something like that? That's what real estate's doing in our town. To build a building like this right now, bare minimum, I'm talking minimalistic building, this size, you're looking at minimum $600,000+. Minimum. You know what young people are saying? Why blow all that money? I'll just open up my home. I'll open up my home. I'll start preaching the gospel right now. We'll start serving people. They're raising that bar and saying, we don't have to wait 10 years for somebody to go through ministry school to minister. We can minister right now. I'm telling you, this is happening at unprecedented rates, and I'm so encouraged by it. The harvest is ripe right now. Paul says this to the church in Colossae. He says, whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. You are serving Lord Christ. For the wrongdoer will be paid back for the wrong he has done, and there is no partiality. Work as if you're working for God, not for man. We try so hard in our lifetime to please man. In churches, we try not to rock the boat. I can't even tell you how many messages. I have so many messages in my queue right now for this past week that are basically like reaching out to me like, hey, can you fix our church problem? We're trying to keep the peace. And I'm like, you're contacting the wrong person. Like, I'm not going to tell you to follow the status quo and, keep peace. And I'm going to tell you, like, burn the whole thing down, right all the wrongs, and press forward. Press forward to that goal. That's your focus. That's what I'm going to tell you. Paul says, work heartily. Whatever you do, you work heartily as for the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. He's our boss, not anybody else. So if we're going to work, if we're going to harvest, if we're going to go out and we're going to break records, and, it's not just about doing it as fast as we can. That was just a friendly competition that we did on the farm. But the point is, when it was harvest time, we didn't mess around. You would never find us sitting in a corner twiddling our thumbs and finding out a way to milk the clock. We worked. When it was harvest time, we worked. And the Bible says that those who work during the harvest time will be rewarded. Remember when Jesus said this? Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. My question to you today, and setting that bar high, raising the expectations, where do you spend your time and where do you spend your money? Where are you investing your treasure? Because wherever that is, without any judgment, without any lectures, without any guilt trips, this is just fact. Wherever your treasure is, wherever you're investing your time, wherever you're investing your money, that's where your heart is. Your heart is there. And so if you're investing your time in your kids, if you're teaching your kids about God, if you're teaching your kids to do things for others, to serve other people, to serve your neighbors, if that's where your time is spent, that's where your heart is. If your money's going to things instead of helping people be clothed, receive water, right? Wherever your money is going, the majority of your money, that's where your heart will be. And I love, like, as I say that, I'm looking back at this table. We have all this stuff that people are bringing in and volunteering and buying things for Magi boxes, and they're buying things for Thomas's trip. He's going to Jamaica, then he's going to Ecuador to spend time with the Campbells. People are bringing in items and supplies for that. And I love that. I look back, and we have our wall of the wells that we've dug. 3 of the 5 wells that we funded are up on that wall. Two more wells have already been funded. Likely they've already been drilled, and Healing Hands is just behind on their communication, which is common. But we have 2 more wells that are going up on that wall. We have another well that we're raising money for this year. We're doing a walk for water in August. That's 6 wells in 4 years, right? It's pretty good. And actually there are 2 wells going in this year. We have another family who we've partnered with they're raising funds for 1 well on their own, in addition to the well that we're funding through this church. Wherever our treasure is, there your heart will be also. I'm telling you, the harvest is ripened right now in this country. Don't listen to people who come up with excuses and, well, our culture, it's so bad, and people are the worst they've ever been, and we're doomed, and don't listen to that stuff. Remember what Paul said. I've not achieved all of this, but one thing I do, not looking back, and I strain forward to that goal. Let's link arms as a congregation. Let's keep that bar high. Let's strain forward towards that goal. Let's lay up our treasures in heaven. Let's spend our time and our money and our resources and our gifts and our talents, our God-given talents. Let's spend that on His kingdom. And watch how God blesses that. That's your message for today, for this week. Go out, find people, bless them, love on your neighbors, teach them about God, invite them here, and see where God blesses that. If there's anybody this morning who's not yet taken that step to put Christ on a baptism and you're ready, we're also ready for you. Or if you have prayer needs,